Good evening. I'm Jambo Nitena. So guys, thank you so much for making the time, both the guys sitting in front of me and the guys who are watching online. This is our first Early Talks Tech event of the year, both live and online. And I just want to give a quick conversation around why Early Talks Tech. And this started with conversations with my friends about African tech stories being told by people who are not necessarily African, most of the conversations. And we needed more and more of us to tell the stories, to complement some of the great work that is already being done by the likes of my brother, Harry Hare, who decided to sit at the back, DX5, who gave me my first opportunity to actually do my podcast and broadcast last year. So here we are today. And I want this to really be a conversation, not just listening to us here. So without much ado, I would like us to start this conversation today. And the title, of course, is Reflections and Lessons for the Future of Tech, specifically for the African continent. So, karibuni. Thank you very much. And I would like to kick off by introducing my special guests today. And let me start with my right, Dr. Shiko Gitau, a good and dear friend. Shiko will talk to you more about herself in a minute, but Shiko is the founder and CEO of Color. On my left is Madam Immaculate Kasait, the first data commissioner in Kenya and probably Africa. She really is here today to talk to us about what the data commission is doing today. Then on my right again, Kamau Kunyiha, who is the head of Eastern and Southern Africa for Credit Info, which is a credit scoring and decisioning company. In Kenya, you call them credit reference bureaus, but I'm here to tell you, and Kamau will tell you, that it is more than just CRB that they do. And last but not least, my brother from another mother, Jack Ngari. Jack is technical director at the office of the CTO at Google. And we like to joke with him that he's probably the most senior African at Google. Guys, karibuni. Thank you very, very much for being here today. So let me kick off with Dr. Shiko Gitau first with intros, and then I'll come to Madam Immaculate Kasait. Shiko, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ali, for inviting me here for these reflections. I love reflections. So my name is Shiko. I'm the CEO of Kala. It's actually Bikala, which means to spark in Zulu.
There's a click in there somewhere.
Okay. We are a digital innovation lab. Our goal is to catalyze Africa's digital future. So this topic is right down our alley. We work with organizations across Africa in helping them build digital strategies, build digital capabilities and innovation capabilities. And it's exciting to be able to influence some of the biggest players in the continent on where technology is heading. And being on the ground with on-ground information and knowledge and experience, it is important to influence how products are being built. And we believe that we can have world-class products from Africa that can change the world.
Thank you, Shiko. Madam Immaculate.
Good evening, audience, and good evening, panelists. Thank you, Ali. My name is Immaculate Kasait. I'm a lawyer by profession, and I'm the data commissioner in Kenya. And I look forward to the engagement this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Immaculate. Jack?
Yeah, I mean, Ali,
Jack, Jack doesn't need introductions, but we'll just give him the opportunity to.
today I promise not to be controversial. Yeah, I mean, it's really a pleasure to be here and to see a lot of faces in the new year. We've not connected for a long time. And, as Ali introduced me, I work for Google, specifically Google Cloud. And I'm part of a team of about 30 or 40 ex-senior executives in the industry, tech industry, with engineering backgrounds, and our job is basically to solve problems for global top companies. And it's exciting for me to sit here in Kenya and work with organizations from all over the world, and they'll hear an accent, a Kenyan accent, and your time zone is Kenya, and they're like, what? We have tech people in Kenya? And so, hopefully not the last. I know there are a couple of you who will probably do a lot better than I have, but, it's a first of many.
So, guys, let's go straight into the heart of the matter. The issue here today is really we are here to reflect and to also sort of have a crystal ball to the future of tech across Africa. But I always, as we start the year, I'm always reminded of the German philosopher who said, we learn from history that we never learn from history. So we don't want to be those who don't learn from history. So let's reflect 2022, 2021, we've just come out of COVID. What are the things that have fundamentally changed in 2022? Let me kick off this conversation, and then I'll open it up with my fellow speakers up here. And then, as is always my case, I want to have a conversation, guys. So I'm not gonna, I really don't want you guys to just listen to us. I want to have a conversation with you guys. And I think there is also someone who's looking at some online conversation that we can also respond to and react to. So I want to reflect personally first to a company that I've served on the board about 9 years now. I mean, I am actually shocked when I think about that. I have been at Longhorn Publishers for 9 years as a board member. And Longhorn, as my brother Robert Ochieng, who's not here today, keeps on reminding us, is always about dual transformation as opposed to just digital transformation. When I joined Longhorn, digital was not even on the radar. And before COVID, if we thought about meetings, it had to be physical meetings. Fast forward to today, COVID, I'm not saying COVID is over. COVID is somewhere within, around, but we've come to live with it. But guess what? Most of our board meetings today, even today, board meetings, committee meetings are virtual. It's either Zoom or Teams. Reflecting on that, reflecting on how far we have come, reflecting on the fact that Longhorn is present in about 12 African markets. We are about to launch a new digital division. We are doing stuff that a traditional publisher would never have thought about doing. So that's reflection. That's just thinking about where we've come from. Jack, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, coming out of the pandemic, let's start with the pandemic. It accelerated a lot of digitization of organizations and actually even ourselves as our lifestyles. And what we've seen across the world is that as we emerged from the pandemic, then we shifted to more of a hybrid kind of world. So it's crossbreed between digitized virtual environments with real life experiences. And so look at this forum that we have here today. There are people sitting here in person who want to get that personal feel, and then there are those who are online who couldn't make it for whatever reason and are connecting to us virtually. And that's the trend that we are seeing the world moving towards. Now, what does it mean to businesses? A lot of businesses have actually virtualized their operations, modernized them, became digital natives, and it powered a lot of industries. Right now, the food delivery industry saw a spike, and it continues being that way. Rather than you get into your car stuck in traffic, you order things online. And so you find that a lot of new emerging businesses that are digital natives have emerged from all of that, and it'll continue to grow into the future. Sure, there'll be a need for also the brick and mortar type feel, but at the same time, there'll also be this area where digital businesses will be able to thrive as well in the new world order. The best case is not even Longhorn publishers. You remember we now have judges adjudicating cases online.
Absolutely.
If that's not transformation, I don't know what is.
Absolutely.
And so, that is the trend that we'll see going into the future. And a lot of the new technologies you're seeing coming up are augmenting both reality on the ground as well as virtually. And the winner who is able to combine those two strengths will probably make a good amount of revenues as well.
Would that winner possibly be Google?
Hopefully, I'm sure there'll be many. Yeah.
Jack, thank you so much. Immaculate. Your reflections.
Coming out of COVID partially is indeed the transformation, and I'll give my own personal experience. When I came into office in the height of COVID,
Correct, I remember
2020,
that.
And one of the tasks ahead of us was actually to have regulations. And regulations require that you have to do stakeholder engagements. And we at the point, there is no way you are going to have physical meetings. You are limited. And we thought the best way then is to utilize online meetings. And I can say as a case study, you succeeded because we were able to hold over 20 meetings. We were able to mobilize stakeholders, plan for the stakeholders' engagement, have 1 hour to 2 hours meetings, listen to their views, actually transcribe that. I remember when we went to Parliament and they said, but where are your stakeholder? We had, and of course, initially when you come, there are screenshots, because when you're having a webinar, what do you have? And there are screenshots to show that there were people present. But we also transcribed. We recorded the meetings, transcribed just to prove. When I look back, I think if we had not been innovative, we probably would be pushing to have our regulations up to now. And that helped us because in 1 year, we were able to get the 3 sets of regulation. I think for me, that's a point of reflection.
In 1 year?
Yes, in 1 year.
Wow.
Then I think it's having that flexibility. But from an African perspective, I think the last year, we are seeing more African countries come up with regulatory frameworks on data protection. We are seeing conversations, we are seeing, and what is interesting about the different regulatory frameworks they are different in one country, they are talking about these different issues. So reflecting back, what does this mean for business in Africa? And especially because the issue around data protection is supposed to be one of the pillars that helps e-commerce. It's about securing personal information so that we are able to push businesses to the next level. But having different legal framework, what does that mean? And that's part of my reflection. The third thing, as I push back the mic to you, we are seeing more and more data protection regulation, more and more data protection authorities coming to force. And
Across
Africa. Across Africa. In the last year, we've seen during the COVID era, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Rwanda, Tanzania this last year. So that has an impact in terms of business. And then we are seeing a lot of sharing of information between Africa and Europe and what GDPR is doing. What does this mean for us? Because like the European Union Data Protection Board, the board is one central place where decisions are made. What does that mean as far as the African continent? Will we be seeing that kind of discussion?
Thank you so much. Those are absolutely great reflections from a regulatory perspective and from a data perspective. Dr. Gitao, your reflections.
So I have to take you back. So we started work at Kala just before COVID. And we were trying to get people to embrace digital and innovation. And people were like, yeah, Shiko, I like what you're saying. I've seen what you've done with the company, the ex-company that you worked with. I really like that. Let's talk more. The way corporates tell you, let's talk more. Let me tell you, March 13th happened. March 15th, everybody was calling. Now, Shiko, what was that thing you were saying about digital? And for me, that was the biggest jump ever. Like within just a couple of weeks, people were like, oh my God, if we don't digitize some of our processes, we're going to die. Yeah? That initial inertia of what are we going to do really hit people. And for me, I will talk about the one thing that really convinced me that I'm in the right career. First of all, my father now understands what I do for a living, which is a good thing. Because he kept asking me, "Ati wanafanyanga nini?" So that's first thing. But the second thing is we got to work with government, not just government of Kenya, but some other governments in like building data dashboards and data work. And for me, looking at just the impact of a very simple dashboard, to be honest, they were very simple dashboards that they were accessing to make decisions around COVID, around response to different things. It persuaded even the worst critic that tech can actually change the world. Let me give an example of government of Kenya because this is very public. We worked with Ministry of Health and Ministry of ICT around COVID data. It was very simple. There was some data that was publicly available. So we used publicly available data to model out what would happen if COVID hit all the 50 million Kenyans. What would happen? And we did a dashboard showing that Kiambu County will have the most deaths. And we mapped it out and we presented it and we gave it to the CS and showed them this is what our data says. It is not very intelligent. It's just based on the information that we are getting from how the disease is acting out. So he sees it and says, so we explain to him the logic behind the dashboard. He goes and presents it to the National Emergency team. And the next thing in the news, Kiambu County has closed all the markets. Kiambu County has done this.
Wow.
And for me, that impact, that was almost instant change. I always say we actually saved lives in a real sense while we were not doctors, because if those actions had not been taken, the response would have been delayed and the infections would have increased to a point where the deaths were happening before even the doctors knew how to treat the disease. Because the first 6 months of the COVID was very confusing even for the doctors. The treatment plan was changing every day because we were working with the doctors in our work. And for me, that example really stuck with me. By the way, just as an FYI, that first dashboard that we produced on 14th of March, and if you look at the dashboard of the number of deaths in Kenya, they match almost word for word.
Wow.
And for me, that is what digital is. So even right now, we're still the government's skunk work when it comes. They say, can we check what will happen? With our partners with the University of Nairobi, is what's the impact of drought on health, on education, on all these things, that the government has become more responsive to what data and digital can do. That, for me, was one of the biggest jumps in
amazing.
during
Shiko, thank you so
COVID.
much. That is powerful. That is extremely powerful.
Yeah.
Kamau, I hope your sound is back online now.
I'm back. So I really like what you said, Shiko, because that's a good example of the power of data. So my reflection is a mixed bag. So looking at a Kenya perspective, they actually thought suppressing data to the bureau would be the best way to manage people's financial
Sorry,
positions.
Kamau, to interrupt you, but when you say bureau, do you mean the Federal
Credit Bureau.
Bureau of
Credit Bureau, sorry.
Investigations, or which bureau do you
So
mean?
suppression of data to the credit bureau seemed to be the ideal thing, but we've seen a very good example of how data actually helps in actually managing situations that you're in. So my reflection was that there were some bad calls made out in the market in Kenya, but in the rest of Africa, we did see some good things coming out of it. As has been mentioned before, people started thinking and saying, how do we digitize our services to be able to reach our customers, to be able to survive? And for us to do that, we need to be able to understand our customers better. So how do we get their data? How do we know how to decision on them and be able to offer the services that we're offering? It means a lot of changes in the way you think and look at your customer, but it was a door opener to people now reacting to the realities of life. Where are we moving to? We're no longer brick and mortar kind of operations as we used to be, but we're becoming more of a hybrid operation. So we need to be able to be ready to adjust to those things. And the only way to do that is availing data to be able to identify, know who you're dealing with, and be able to react to their needs.
That is fantastic. Guys, thank you so much. There's a story I want you guys to hear. And I know I didn't warn him, but he's from the coast like me. Kwa hivyo kuzungumza ni, it's like this. I'm looking at my brother behind there. There's a story that I really want you guys to hear about how a business transformed itself during COVID in terms of events and COVID caught up. I know, Harry, I'm talking about you. And DX5. Harry, if you don't mind, I know I'm throwing a monkey at you. I did not warn you, but this is a story that is so important for everyone to hear. How CIO DX5 transformed itself almost literally overnight because of COVID. Harry, over to you.
Good evening. Yeah, that's a curveball. But happy to share. So my name is Harry. I work for DX5, formerly CIO Africa. It was a matter of survival. So it's a I wouldn't call it strategy, because it wasn't strategy. It was survival. We had been doing certain things in certain ways. COVID came, disrupted everything. So we were either supposed to sit down and look at 70% of our revenue leaking and disappearing, or protecting it. Proactively protecting it. So we chose to protect it. And we protected it by innovating on the things that we used to do. So we're among the very first people to jump onto virtual event production. And we actually went around, because our ideas were kind of interesting, because we wanted to use a studio to produce our events. But most of the studios at that time the studios that were operating at that time were built to record, package, then distribute. That's most studios, that's how they operate. You record, you package, and then you distribute. But to run a live event, you can't do that. You have to stream it. So we really suffered. It was painful, because some of the studios were going to, they were buying bundles, and you're pushing 4K video on Safaricom bundles. It was not going to happen. It was really painful, and therefore we just decided to bite the bullet and invest in a studio. And we've never looked back.
Thank you so much, Harry, for that anecdote. I knew, we have talked about this story, and I really thought that this was important for us to reflect on. So, guys, you've heard from local businesses, you've heard from how government innovates, you've heard from a NSE quoted company that never thought about digital, you've heard from big tech, You've heard from, a credit scoring. I'm very particular when I speak to my brother Kamau. It's not a credit reference bureau. Fine, they are licensed as a credit reference bureau, but they do so much more. So those are reflections, guys. So I would love to hear somebody else in the audience who may want, just one more person, who may want to reflect on their journey during this, what our friend Moses Kemibaro called it COVID-assisted digital transformation. Because that's exactly what it was. Most of us and most companies and most organizations were actually forced into it, literally forced into it. Anybody wants to share with us? Remember, I told you guys, this is our conversation. This is not a speech for us. Anyone wants to share? Going one, going twice. Yes, sir. Please state your name and you have the floor.
So my name is Keith Jiro, and I'm a communications and PR consultant. I'd say for me, the transformation happened when it comes to working because in terms of, I had never previously worked in a remote setting, and I used to hear in very minimal quarters people talking about remote working and virtual, but it never made sense to me. And so when I started working right immediately after school, in fact, right from the interview was via Zoom, and at that time I didn't even know how to use it, and so I had to learn Google a thing or two. How do you use Zoom? Is your mic on or off? Because at that time also TikTok came about, and we used to see these videos where your mic is on and you don't know, but you're just doing other things.
It's called Zoom bombing. We even coined a new word for it, Zoom bombing.
Yeah, and so getting through that phase and then working in a remote setting and just knowing how to use Zoom, knowing how to use Teams, as you've mentioned, because when you're dealing with different are on different platforms. And so I think also the realization that work is not just limited to the office space, and then also for me discovering co-working spaces where I can just go if the office is giving me 2-3 days, and then those 2 days I'm bored from working from home, I can go and work somewhere. So I think for me it came about from our perspective and just remote working and how, and some even people questioning whether maybe companies, do we need to reduce office space? Does everyone really need to come? So that for me was a realization for me.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So guys, we've heard about reflections, lessons. So let's move to crystal balls. And I want to throw this open to conversations now. And I know everybody here today has heard about ChatGPT. What is this animal called ChatGPT? And how is it going to affect our lives, how we work? What's the future looking like? Heck, what's today looking like? Dr. Shiko, you want to go for it?
That's going to be controversial.
Please, fire it.
So ChatGPT is a Google killer.
Ouch.
No, but for real, I don't
Judge.
think.
I'm not the one who said it.
No, but he's going to come. He has a comeback for me, I'm sure. But anyway, what I love about it is super intelligence, but it is not even at 1% of where it should be. It's growing, yeah, and we are growing it as human beings. So the version we have right now, they're saying they've just scrapped the internet the last 3 years, and it's the last 3 years of COVID, which is very significant, guys. Let me give you a data point. Think of the 2,000 years of Christianity. Think of it. Just put that number in your head. Yeah, all the content that was created up to 2020. Then think 2020 from March to September. So the content, the Christian content that was created between March and September of 2020 is much larger than the Christian content that was created in the 2000 years.
In 2000 years?
Yes. So, ChatGPT, yes, this is actual data. So think of it you go for Bible study nowadays online and it's recorded and put on YouTube. You go for all your 2 sessions that you go to church, all the Sunday school, youth, everything is online. You think of it that way. It's literally, that's what happened. And chat was actually created with data from that period. So it's super intelligence for this digital transformation space that we are in. But they're saying they're releasing a new version that is going to go back, I think 20 years or something, in the next couple of weeks, or if it's not released yet. There's a pilot of it, which means that the internet AI is being informed a lot by the content on the internet, which is amazing. Yesterday I was talking to a friend who's that, all of us are always saying we're going to write a book, yeah? So her dad has been saying that I want to write a book. And he has this very elegant PowerPoint presentations. You know what they did? They took those PowerPoint presentations, plugged them into chat. Guess what it came up with? A book with a title, 14 chapters.
That is interesting.
Yes. So, but for me, that is interesting. So it is fast tracking. I know you're asking about the future of publishing and storytelling. That it's changing literally in our eyes, because if chat is able to produce a book given an outline of your content, then it can do anything in terms of storytelling. If yesterday there was a great podcast that was released by Rod Huffman talking to chat and just plugging in, and it was talking like a human being. And while it was saying, it was recasting itself. I'm a machine. I'm informed by collective intelligence. I don't have an opinion. But if you read it without knowing it's an AI, you'd think it's a human being.
Is it telling us it doesn't have an opinion and it already has an opinion?
Yes, it's basically. But what as an African, every time I see a new technology and a new exciting thing and a new wave, because it's every company I'm speaking to is saying, how can we utilize chat? I'm thinking, I'm sure you can. It is great, but from an African context, guys, the internet has been formed by what? Knowledge from who? From all of this guy. So if from the West.
Yes, from the West.
Primarily English. The English West. And what makes me sad is I tried, this is before yesterday, I tried getting chat plugging in some Kikuyu words or some Kiswahili words, just to see what it's going to do. And it will tell you illegible. And it drives me crazy, because Facebook has a lot of content in our languages, but it's considered rubbish, yeah?
Yeah, but that's challenge. That is a challenge to everyone here today.
But you see, yesterday there was a story that came out that chat was actually being cleaned up, trained
by African workers.
Which means that our intelligence as African is actually appreciated in as far as it's affirming a certain narrative. So my challenge is, even as I was excited when I heard about chat, to be honest, because I was saying it's user generated, it's going to be informed by our knowledge. We can tell our own stories as Africans. But when this just how it's being trained without the total knowledge, our combined intelligence as the world. It means that AI is still highly biased, yeah? And it's racist, biased, and geographical. And it's not just as I read an Indian article saying the same thing about Hindi. And it's something that we need as we're getting excited about these technologies. And this goes to the top African engineer at Google.
Okay. Can I just jump in here?
No. To help in informing this, because if you're looking at the crystal ball, 2023 is a very defining year for AI. We must we must inform how AI is being
Whilst
created.
I agree with you,
Yeah.
let me just say this. I absolutely agree with you, but let me just say this.
Mm-hmm.
We will not sit here and expect the Western world to deal with our issues, period.
True.
Whether it's Microsoft or Facebook or Google. So here's a challenge to all of us here listening in, 5 of us here speaking, and everybody else who is listening in. This is a challenge. This AI conversation that we've been talking about for years, that it is racist, that it is, how do you expect somebody from Alabama to think about us? How do you expect somebody sitting in Westminster Bay to think about? They have their own issues, like we have our own issues. So guys, this is to the African intelligentsia. Let's step up.
Exactly.
Let's step up. Jack, do you have anything to comment on?
I don't know. The thing about Ali and Dr. Shiko, they like inciting me. But this year, the resolution is to keep calm. I just wanna take you guys through a small journey about the technology itself. And those of you who are online, or those of you here so I'm talking about the AI technology. And those of you who are here, or those who are online and are engineers or are doing some sort of research scientists in data and AI, please don't catch any feelings if I veer off. I'm just trying to bring things a bit more grounded for us. So the last time we had a fundamental shift in technology was roughly 16 years ago, which is in 2007, when smartphones became mainstay. That everyone had a smartphone pretty much. It was under $50 that you could get a smartphone. And so we're well overdue with innovation in the tech side, something that will bring a step change into organizations and how we perceive technology. But for some of us who have been on this journey for a long time, some of you seem like this may think that some of this technology just appeared one day. But it wasn't like what you call a Cambrian explosion, which is where in evolution theory they say, boom, something happened and the world was formed. It wasn't that way. It has been an evolution, so to speak. And those of you who are old school like me, remember there was something called recurring neural networks that were used to process natural language processing.
I'm sorry, Jack, I must interrupt you. Are you old school? I doubt you are.
Okay, so I'm sorry, but Ali, can I finish? So
please proceed.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
But the problem with those networks back then was that it couldn't ingest a lot of data. So like if you give it 2 paragraphs of a story, it'll forget the previous paragraph. So
Correct.
if one paragraph I said, Commissioner Immaculate is a bright lady, and then I will say today, the next paragraph I'll say the day is bright. It'll associate the word bright with that somehow during my day I met Commissioner Immaculate.
Correct.
It doesn't remember. But then in 2017, Google Brain released a paper called, you can Google it as well, it's called Attention is All You Need. And in that paper, they talked about something called transformers. And what it did was that it was able to remember a whole bunch of text going way back and understand not only that, but also in languages, we have something called contextual representation, where you actually, when you say a word in one form, you can switch it up in another language, like for example in French, where you have to put the gender specific, it remembers that as well. So attention, it can see a whole bunch of text, and self-attention, within that whole sentence, it can actually see how it relates to, in terms of context, which is something that was lacking before. Computers didn't have the context of it all. And so that paper heralded a whole bunch of startups that said, hey, wait a minute, this is something we can use for different things. And so you have some that are doing ChatGPT, for example, that came up with their way of doing, getting the net and putting stuff in. You have others that are doing images, like Stable Diffusion, that are doing images. Google also released theirs, something called Imagen. And so you have so many of these coming up. And there will be more. There'll be tons of startups with bright people like us, all of you here, including, I'm hoping, a lot of African startups that will take advantage of this new technology to solve our problems and to even compete in a global stage. What does this mean? The technology is still not where it's supposed to be. So you find certain challenges still, which have progressively been solved. So the things that you mentioned about biases, for example, for you to train a model, you have to make sure that you tell it, hey, this content you're getting off the net, if it's talking about, let's say, racism, you have to tell it this is not a right thing to do. So sort of something like reinforced learning. But what's happening right now, because it's expedient for a lot of companies to release their products, sometimes, and it's on a test, they do something called post hoc classifying, which means that the model will spit something, let's say, that's not appropriate. And then just like in a TV, if I cuss right now, Ali will put bleep, so you won't hear, but you've not changed my mind, really. So what they're trying to do is change the mind of the models. And on. Things like, for example, making sure that factuality, because sometimes when you say something and it's convincing, people can think it's actually true, and it's not necessarily true. Things we call latent learning, which means, like, for example, if you use a math question, I think I saw one where someone asked it, what is 3 + 3 or something, and give me the steps, and it gave, and I think one of the models gave a wrong answer, or Mike's mom has three sons, and then it gave, I don't know what. So those are things like human reasoning and logical that is still not able to solve, but in due course, you'll find a lot of these models improving and being able to do these sort of things. So factuality is an important point, and we have to guard against that, because you have to spit out the right sort of information. And then the other part of it is understanding versus learning, because it does learning. But what about the context understanding of it all? That's something that has to be worked on. And many other things that come, what kind of qualities do you want the bot to, the model to spit out? If you're in a hospital and the model spits out something that is, let's say, I have these symptoms. Oh, dude, you're gonna die. Those are things that have to go in it. Now, what's the opportunity, Ali, just to sum up on my side?
Yes.
When I was growing up, and all of you, those again who are old school, like me, remember there's this program that used to come in VOK called Saber Riders. And these guys used to enter some machine.
Correct.
And then they had an exoskeleton, and then they used to fight the bad guys in Japan.
Yes.
And you'll find that, a lot of these models are really to amplify human capabilities. But it doesn't mean that the human becomes dumb or is being replaced. No, not really. The pilot has to also get some skill sets to be able to use this in a meaningful way. If it's going to spit out a book, you have to read it. You have to make sure it still conforms to the right kind of thing that you're trying to say, and just make sure that it gets your personal style into it. Because also as human beings, we can tell something that is, And but having said that, a lot of industries are gonna still have things that are gonna be automated, and a lot of cost savings. If you're talking about music industry, digital rights management, you're talking about movie industries. All these things are really gonna go through a shift, and it's exciting. And for us in Africa, the opportunity presents to us to showcase our things globally, where no one knows, like Stability AI or even Google products. You don't know where it's from. And so we can use this as a voice for ourselves and make use of these models.
Jack, thank you so much. That is...
Elevator speech.
That is spot on. Jack, that is absolutely spot on. The last couple of days, we've been talking about ChatGPT in education, in advertising. I see my brother Ahmed there smiling. But the thing that really impacted me in the last couple of days, just listening to the conversations around ChatGPT, was reading a story in the New York Times about a professor in Michigan State University, who read a paper from a student, and he was completely blown over, completely astounded. It was the perfect term paper. Punctuations, sentences, where to stop, the language. And he was trying to align this paper with the student. And I was like, nah, it's not happening here. What's going on? So he went online and he got this same paper from ChatGPT. So what's the reflex action for an old school professor? Plagiarism. That's the reflex action. But this professor did not do no such thing. He went to class. He had a conversation with the student. He said, look, I'm not going to accept this for sure, but this is interesting. Let's have a conversation as a class. How do we incorporate these new technologies? So the questions we are going to ask now, going forward, is how do you guys feel about such a thing? And how do I, as a professor, feel about such a thing? Oh, by the way, how does this bloody robot also think about this thing? Completely incorporating this. So I had this very interesting conversation with a colleague of mine who is a senior leader in one of the leading universities in this country. And she trains senior leadership. It's like, Ali, this is absolutely mind-boggling. Completely interesting. We are definitely looking into this, how we can incorporate this. Now, complete mind shift in terms of how we look at the same thing. Yeah. Now, some universities in the same countries are banning ChatGPT. Some are saying, wait a minute, this may be MVP, minimum viable product, or whatever we want to call it in tech, but let's see where this goes. Madam.
Ali, just something I can throw to
Yes.
Madam Kasait as well. And it's just a carry on. So there's also an aspect of intellectual property rights, which comes with, if I generate a paper from ChatGPT, it has, as you said, it picked from a model that read through everything, kind of understood learned how to put down the paper, but this information came from somewhere. So the attribution to the originator, because it's derived set of works.
Yes.
How do we face those challenges going to the future that, these are people's data that is sucked in and it's churning out? Music, there are some that are now producing, Harmonia is actually producing music based out of tons of music that is ingested and then producing music. So how do you ensure that the end person who actually came with the original set of works is also compensated in one form or shape? By the way,
that is the $1 million question. Dr. Shiko, I'll come back to you. Relax. That is the $1 million question. And that Jack has started my discussion and conversation with Madam Immaculate Kasait. What the implications for this from a data protection perspective is astounding and game-changing. I want to take us back a little bit to the early days of social media. We forget that social media itself is what we used then to call user-generated content. All right? So, I kept on telling my young kids, young professionals that I interact with, I tell them, guys, when you start complaining about Facebook, my only question to you is, who told you to go and put on Facebook a relationship, it's complicated? Who told you? Who forced you to do it? And then when it starts serving you ads about relationships, you start complaining. Wani, you think you paid for that data? So it's a give and take. Now, we are entering a new paradigm. When it comes to data, and when it comes to privacy, how do we deal with it? I don't suppose we have answers, but I just want to hear from you.
I think the more we advance in technology, the greater the challenge and risk on personal data privacy. And I know earlier in the late last year during the General Privacy Assembly, the conversation around data protection vis-a-vis artificial intelligence and how then are you seen to be, what's the balance between artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and data privacy? we didn't come up with any conclusion.
Sure.
You can see
I'm
there is
sure.
always a divide between the innovators and the data privacy. And it was interesting to listen to some of the, Switzerland and European countries are quite firm in terms of
They're
dealing
ahead.
with
They're
issues of
ahead.
data
Let's
protection.
we should agree that they are ahead
They are.
and how we can learn
Yes,
from them.
and just listening into one of the developers in one of the institutions saying the contradiction is when you take scientists, data scientists, and engineers to study, you teach them to harvest as much information as they can.
Yes.
So they harvest information, and then suddenly you're telling them, no,
Stop.
You can only, what we are now saying as a principle, purpose, limitation. You can only increase information for this. But you see, we are not going back to the School of Computer Science to redesign
Correct.
how, as academia, we are teaching these young people so that they know that there are tools today in the world that you can actually use to collect information and anonymize them.
Absolutely.
We have all bought into the pie that everything must be out there in the public and there is no solution available for us to try and protect this information. Yet, so we are not innovating enough on data privacy. We are innovating.
I love that.
We are innovating to commercialize, but we are not innovating for data privacy. And yet, that is what we should be doing in terms of answering that question. Because, Ali, if you allow me, we are all human. You cannot replace the human being.
100%.
And at some point, we'll all get tired of your information being known too much, whether it's for commercial reasons or whatever else. And somebody always makes the joke, I think it's the CEO of Amnesty, he says, we are all clothed here. But like you're saying, when you go online, you're literally naked. You share everything. Everything.
Yes.
And we never reflect what that means. You see, so the conversation must be, where is the balance? Where is the balance? Because as long as you're adopting artificial intelligence, it's an ethical question. It's actually an ethical question that how can we protect people, even as we innovate using data anonymization, to be able to protect this person? Yet Jack will tell me that the more data I have, the more information I have about you, the more AI is more accurate.
That's true.
But just to answer one question, you said about property rights. I think that's a concern.
Big time.
That's a very big concern, and it's very unfortunate that many times we don't realize that a lot has gone to somebody putting together intellectual property. But I know that is one of the things that the ministry is very keen on, to make sure that we are protecting people intellectual property rights. That is important. But it's more awareness that people don't know. And even as an area of law, there are very few lawyers practicing. And so you see, it's an area that has an opportunity, but would rather be doing land and conveyancing.
Mugunda.
You know?
Mugunda.
Yes.
I have a question for you, which I want you to mull over. Then I go to my brother Kamau. And the question is this, framed in a sentence and a question. You know, we've all had this thing bandied around every day in our lives. Data is the new oil. Who is giving the license to mine that oil? We are not. We've left it at data is the new oil. But when it comes to extracting that oil, if you allow me to use that term, it's a wild, wild west. Everyone and his father and grandmother and children are all over the data. Food for thought. I'll come back to you. Come on. From a financial services perspective, data and ChatGPT and all these other manenos that we've been talking about. You are at the forefront of data when it comes to whether I can get a loan or not, and whether somebody else, is doing the right thing, or all these modelings around decisioning and stuff like that. Talk to us about that a bit.
I think I'll take you back to the first question you asked about what's happened from COVID.
Yes.
And one of the things we've seen globally is e-commerce grew tremendously.
Yes.
Because that was the only way people could interact. Now, when you went to digital, for financial services to operate, the brick and mortar disappeared. I could no longer have the person stand in front of me for me to be able to know, is this person worth it or not, whatever it is they're applying for. Do they have the assets to back whatever it is they needed? So they needed some different form to be able to assess or evaluate this person to be able to provide the financial service that was needed. So in the financial sector, the hunger for the data has grown. So the more I get to know you, the better I can serve you. As time progresses and all these e-commerce platforms are coming up, it's changing again from product-centric financial solutions to customer-centric solutions. Again, that requires more in-depth data within the area that you're managing or that you're dealing in. So the need for data keeps going, not just about your past performance on other financial products that you've taken, but what are your flows? Who are you dealing with? How often do you deal? What geographic area are you managing these solutions and everything? So that need and hunger for that data keeps growing and growing. And it gets to a point where you start realizing, okay, fine, where does it stop? And because unfortunately, the fact is that you do have a few bad apples that will misuse that data.
Always.
But if you think about the more data I give about myself...
Madam Immaculate is waiting for them here.
Yes. But the more information I can give about myself, the more the financial institution can tailor a solution that is good for me. It's no longer fit in a box, one solution for everyone. And that's where we're actually getting to. If you look at now actually talking about Africa, because we were talking about Africa, you now have maybe 70-80% of the population under 30 years old. What are we looking at? We're looking at people who no longer understand how to deal with paper, but actually want to be able to deal on an app.
Don't get me started.
And that's their way of communication. That is their life. That's how they deal. Now, if you're going to survive as a financial institution, you need to be able to know how you're going to interact with that person from that platform, which is data.
Absolutely. Guys, I'm going to come back to you just now, but Shiko, my sister here, has been looking at me badly for a couple of minutes. Shiko, you have the flow.
Thank you. As a recovering academia, actually using ChatGPT.
Recovering academia.
Actually using chat to produce your paper is actually not purely plagiarism, because that's what you do with Google as a brain. You go and search for papers and cite them and write what you apply is the logic behind it. So some of the useful use cases I've seen being used in academia is say, okay, produce all your papers with chat all you want, but you need to understand what is the point of view of the world and produce your own point of view to either counter or
I like that.
Or add, or what is it called? Or agree with it.
Agree, yeah.
I think if I was to go back as a professor,
that's what you'll do.
I'll say, just produce, then come back to me with an argument of whether you agree with that opinion or not. Yes, because it's going to happen. It's going to be part of our lives. And there's a great paper, I think, that was produced by, I can't remember who it was, around the imagery one. So there are these beautiful pieces of art that you can produce online and print and put in your house that have been produced from the collective images from an art gallery in France.
Okay.
So everybody was arguing, whose IP is it? Is it some guy who died 300 years ago? Is it the museum who has it? Or is it the guy who is running a model to produce these images because they're beautiful? And every time you click, you get a new one. It is actually quite beautiful. and you're asking whose IP is it in an AI world? Because it is not one single person who's put it together. Is it the person who's running the model, or is it the models itself?
So
And that's the question.
So are you saying we need to potentially redefine what IP means going forward?
And who owns it?
So that's a crystal ball.
Yeah.
We start thinking about. Interesting thoughts there.
And in the
Shiko,
same way
I
with
completely
paper,
agree.
because in the paper, if I'm a student, I'm the one who's asked the most logical questions to this AI. So I was smart enough to ask the right question for it to produce for me the right paper.
Yes.
If another student asks a different question in the
They will
same
not
topic,
get the same
paper.
the same
So
paper.
who owns that IP? Is it the AI? Is it me? Because of
Or is it somebody else
or is it
who's
some?
unknown?
Yeah.
Nice.
You asked a question about who licenses
Yes.
for the Wild West.
Yes.
I think that is why data protection authorities were set up,
Absolutely.
to bring sanity to that industry, to try and not limit, but at least regulate. And going back to Kamau, going back to Kamau's conversation around making information, your product customer-centric. That's the whole essence of the data protection regime. It's about making data customer-centric. That now, me as the owner of this information, I can actually demand from my end access to what you have about me. I can demand for data portability. I hope someday we have a conversation on a list chat on data portability, because actually what it means is that if hospital A has my information about my health and I'm going to hospital B, my information should move to hospital B seamlessly.
Oh God, don't get
So
me started
that is
again.
that is a right which I have, but the question is the implementation. The third right is object. I can object. It's true. As a bureau or an app, you collect information from me, but when you design your systems, you should be able to realize that, ask me, tell me why you're collecting my information and for what purpose.
Correct.
Meaning, I have to either tick the box and agree, because I have a right to be informed that you're collecting my information and what purpose. I can object. And then there's a whole list of the principles of what data protection is, what is required of you, and the purpose for that. They're almost 9 or so.
I love that.
So you see, because I think the realization is that the data is the new oil, and we need somebody to bring everyone to the table so that we're also able to protect the data subject. Because the converse of not protecting them is identity theft, is discrimination, it is online trolling. And an example is given, a very simple example of a school whose counselor lost their laptop. And imagine they had all this information about these children, personal information. And when you're going to see a school counselor, it's very personal.
Extremely.
But that, they did not inform the parents. So that information found itself in the dark web. And now they were trolling all these children. So what the parents were saying, I wish you had informed us. And that comes the point about when a data breach happens, it's important to tell the regulator and also inform your client. It's not for anything else, for their own protection.
For their own protection.
But many times we tend to shy away from that.
That's true.
And yet that's an issue of governance and accountability.
That is absolutely
So regulators,
correct.
and also because the conversation is already around Africa, I think that's why you're seeing, we realize the space we are as a continent. This is where the resource is. This is where we have a younger demographic. This is where the business opportunity in terms of digital talent are. And that, therefore, they need to regulate that space. That's why you're seeing many different African countries passing the regulatory framework, putting in place data protection authorities. And the conversation now is how do we make sure there's easier data operability across Africa, movement of data across the African continent? What framework is this? Because when you see people have different data protection framework, it becomes very difficult for them to.
There's no interoperability.
Yes. Yeah, so it's important to have this conversation.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. I'm very conversant about the time that has passed. And so I want to open this conversation now, really open to my audience sitting here. And probably if guys are listening to me online, you can tag me on my LinkedIn profile. I will listen to your questions, and if we have enough time, we will respond to them. If not, I'm always available. We can continue to have this conversation. Guys, any burning comments, questions from your side, from my live audience? Let's get a question here from Riaz, and then we'll take another one from the guy behind, and then from Michael in front. So those will be 4 questions. Guys, please limit yourselves to 1 question because of the time and the number of people who want to ask. Riaz, over to you.
Hi guys. Sorry, I'm like you, ChatGPT is the future. Once you see it, that's the only future. But I think for Africa, there's obviously other things. Maybe everyone can just list maybe 2 things that are important, because we've kind of focused on ChatGPT and data, and that's, yes, a big part of the future, but I think there's other things.
So you want some more things from us? Okay, so I will answer that. What are the other potential things that we are looking at? Andrea, since you asked, I'm going to go straight into fintech and banking, because that's my first love. So, right, next.
Good evening, everyone.
Yes.
The name is Chris Otundo. I run one of Kenya's largest job tech platforms, Brighter Monday. And
hi, Chris.
Hi, Jumbo.
I'm coming to you for a job tomorrow.
No problem at all. We're the home of all jobs. Just curious, perhaps for the bureau chief.
Bureau chief guy.
Do you envisage a time when perhaps this protection then goes further to say that I need to also access the model which you developed on my data, and I therefore can challenge why you placed me on A rating or B rating for a decision you're making? I don't know if you heard me.
Yeah. Good question. I will take one last one from Michael in front here, and then go straight into.
Good evening, everyone. Michael Mishi. My question is to the whole panel. Maybe also echoing what Riaz had said. So we've only had maybe 2 topics. Or I'd like to get your opinion on the topics of engineers, post-COVID, during COVID, the burnout they've experienced, a lot of the work they've put in, because this was a space where they had to work a lot to keep the economies of the whole world running. And now things are coming back, either you're going home or you're slowing down.
So what's your question? I didn't get that question.
I want you guys to talk about that. I think it's something that's important.
Okay.
That's not been talked about.
Jack, will you take that? Sure. All right, great. So we come back here. We start with Madam Commissioner.
Yes, the government collects a lot of information, just like private sector. And yes, it's
10-0.
And I just want to give a bit of background why this office was put in place. One, it was around the controversial conversation on Huduma number.
Yes.
And the court decision was there needed to be an office of the data commissioner to be able to assure, because it's really an assurance. It's a quality assurance in terms of office. How do we do this? Just remember, the Data Protection Office applies both for private and public As long as the data controller, whether in public or private, it applies across. One is issuance of advisories. They may not be in the public, but we do quite a bit of advisories and they seek them. Including Huduma, including when Ministry of Health wants to broadcast information. There are various advisories we issue, including the expressway. And I remember there was a lot of complaint initially about how much information they are collecting. You saw that it may not be in the public domain. Besides advisory is also guidance notes to guide specific areas. And this year, like you said, our reflection is, as an office, we'll be issuing even more additional guidance notes. One of them has been, of course, issues around access to buildings and what it means in terms of information that is collected. So guidance notes on private firms, guidance note on the fintech industries, on MNOs. That's the other way in terms of guidance notes. Of course, how we protect your data, it's also on enforcement. In the event there is a violation, we have the power to actually go there and enforce. And you may just know of a few, but behind, like you say, the water might look calm here, but under the water there's a lot going on, including writing to institutions in terms of explaining why certain things are going the way they are, and of course audits. Those are some of the ways in terms of making sure that your data is protected. And if you have a complaint against any government institution, please feel free to approach us. We'll be able to address the concern.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you for that person who asked that question and for Madam Commissioner's response. The next question was on Chief Bureau. Over to you, Chief Bureau.
I think in response to your question, I guess, the whatever scores we output are really based on available data. Now that data looks at, this is what this person looks like, and from what we've seen in the past, amongst a huge data set, this is a likely outcome of this person. So we never say this is the way that you are. We say that based on what we've seen, people of similar characteristics with the same data seem to look like this. So we're not saying this is who you are, this is what you are. We just say that you fall within this same category. So when it comes to lending, we say people who look like this, the probability of default falls within this range. We're not saying that is what you are, but I, as an institution that's actually lending, I'm informed to know this is the possibility of risk of whatever I'm going to give you. So if you could say, look, I don't agree with this date or this score because that year this and this happened. It's well understood, but then all we're saying is that your characteristics fall within a similar band of people who have a similar data set, should I say. I hope that answers the question.
Partially. So I would suggest after this, over drinks, you guys can discuss further, and I'll be in the middle somewhere to refer you just in case things get rough. Shiko, you want to answer something?
So it is the question around, what is it called?
Engineers.
Oh, no, actually, engineers was, I'm leaving to the people who coach engineers.
Wow.
I want to answer the question about
About?
What else?
What else?
So I know you talked about your excitement around banking and
Yes.
finance. I'm actually excited about health.
Great.
So over the past year also, I've been exposed about health. And it's what I'm loving about actually the future of digital health is it's gone beyond things. It's no longer about apps.
Things.
That is what Mbogwanje here calls them, Mavitu. Yeah? To solving actual problems. In such fascinating ways. So we work with maybe 6 set of doctors, and they're all solving a part of the health space in very innovative ways that actually is pushing the needle. Yeah? Who would have known that it takes 40 days to get in 4 weeks, 4 days to 6 weeks to get a diagnosis, for a cancer diagnosis in Kenya? Yes. but most people actually would die without knowing that they had cancer.
Wow.
And some techies are working towards reducing that to 2 days, because that is what is globally acceptable. Yeah? Who knew that every equipment that you're using in any hospital in Kenya is actually second-hand and obsolete, some of them. There are some techies who are working towards how do we give them a second lease of life, produce enough biotechs to actually solve. Like, all these fascinating solutions that if you line them out together in a user journey of health, in another 5 years, we'll be having really highly hacked universal healthcare using what we have. And so they're saying we don't want to rely on anything out there. We are African doctors. We've been working in Marsabit. We are solving for a Marsabit woman. And this is what the resources we have. That's what is fascinating and exciting.
Loving it. Yes. Thank you so much, Shiko. Jack, I'll come to you, and then I will answer my Riaz's question from my perspective. Over to you on engineers.
Yeah. I mean, just before I answer engineers, I just want to say something about why
the
conversation
don't listen to
has focused a lot on AI. And it's an enablement thing, Riaz. I think about it from a perspective of, imagine the possibilities of, right now we say we don't have enough skills in engineering, in doctors, etc. And the reason why we just don't have enough universities, we just don't have enough teachers who are qualified. What are the possibilities of having personalized teachers using some sort of AI system to teach more people how to do what they're doing? And that's the possibility. So I see it as a platform of a horizontal, but the verticals, it's up to us to figure out cancer treatment. How do we improve the vertical on cancer treatment? Education is another one, etc. And that's where I see the lot of possibilities. You're in the data center business. How do you spit out a number for me what my sustainability of my servers that I'm running in your data center looks like at real time, crunching all these numbers that I'm doing. And so that's where the possibilities now open up for new industries beyond the platform. On the question on engineers having burnout, it's typical for us engineers to always introspect and think, man, we're the guys in the world. But let's take it, and we do think that way sometimes. But let's take it broadly. During COVID, doctors, nurses were falling ill, and some were dying. So they had a lot of stress in their work. Hospitals, in some cases, were overwhelmed. Yeah. People in the tourism, restaurant, hoteling businesses were losing jobs. It was putting a strain on family units because, the kids are all at home. You're wondering whether your kids are going to go to school the next time. So everyone across the world was under quite a bit of stress. What we're grateful for is that we all in this room and online emerged, and some of us are doing okay. And now it's the phase of taking advantages of new industries that have been created as a result of COVID. And that's where we focus on. Beyond that, the question you asked about, the stress levels, etc. I think those are things to do with self-care that you really need to focus on. I'm not an expert in that, so I can't really, give you advice. Maybe go to one of the chat bots and ask it. No, that's just a joke. But it's important that you also take care of yourself and your mental health. And now that you've come out of it, and sometimes, for some of people it's less stressful. For others, it's become more stressful. And figure that out. Yeah.
Jack, thank you so much. Before I talk a bit about what my thoughts in terms of the crystal ball, looking at the crystal ball from a financial services perspective, I just want to ask Hashim if there are at least 2 questions online that are interesting. I'd love to hear about them after I finish this chat that I'm about to. For me, what is the future looking at? Rather, what is the future? What should we be looking forward to when it comes to financial services, fintech? I think we are beyond this manenos of financial inclusion. I think you will all agree with me. But I think one of the things that we need to do is redefine financial inclusion from an African perspective. Again, this whole Western thinking around financial inclusion and being drilled down to us about what financial inclusion is, somebody who doesn't have a bank account, for example. I'm like, dude, there are 90% of Kenyans who have M-Pesa. As far as I'm concerned, that's a bank account. It's just not a bank account that you think about in New York or London. But they can do more of that. They can do more on that mobile money wallet than probably a person who has a bank account, because more often than not, my bank account doesn't help me. I'm serious. My bank account doesn't help me. It helps me because I have money in the bank account, but it doesn't help me in terms of agility of how I engage and how I interact. Let me just give you a quick example. How many basic bills do you generally have every month that you must pay? Pick a number, 5. All of us, at least 5 or 6, all right? Do we really have to worry about paying those bills every month? Do I have to go to Lipana M-Pesa and pick up and make those payments every month? I mean, we've talked about artificial intelligence until kingdom come today evening here. Why can't somebody just, for crying out loud, sort me out in 1 minute? We are busy people here, everybody. That's the future. And that future is happening. It's going to start happening. And I can guarantee you it's not going to come from incumbents. And if Robert Ochieng is listening to me from wherever he is, I am guaranteeing you it's not going to come from incumbents, because we've talked about this for years. We are at that point where we are redefining what financial inclusion is. We are redefining how we deal with our financial services providers. Yeah, we are talking about data protection is critical to what open finance is going to be going forward. What is open finance? Simple. I don't like my bank today. I just port my bank account, not tomorrow, now. I move it quickly. It's already happening in Europe. It happened in Europe because they got their foundations right when it comes to data protection. So that's the future. And that future is going to happen faster than a New York minute, or should I say Nairobi minute. That's really, for me, it's as basic as that. And we are going to see super interesting fintechs coming out of Africa that are more valuable. We're already seeing it, more valuable than banks. There's a fintech in Nigeria that is more valuable than the largest bank in Nigeria. That's the future, and that future is already happening.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
You raise a good point, especially in the financial industry. It's actually unfortunate, but whether it's banking or insurance, what you find a lot in Africa that they don't know who their customers are. They don't know you. I've got to say, the other day I got a call from Britam. They're doing a survey, a satisfaction survey, customer satisfaction survey. And hand on heart, I didn't know I had a policy with them, because all my insurance is done through a broker. So I don't know who the insurer is. If it's my bank, every time I go in there and I want to open a new account, they ask me for a new passport size picture,
100%.
Fill in another form.
100%.
I mean, they really don't know who I am. So I think it's not that complicated looking at it from a crystal ball. It's just get to know your customer and customize your service for that person. And they have enough data internally to do that.
Absolutely. So guys, I'm afraid we are coming to the end of this, I'm hoping, super interesting evening, but I am told that we have some questions from, yes? Don't worry, you can just bring them. Or you want to read them? Yeah, please read them for me.
Okay, this question is from Kasim Okera. Thank you for your question.
Kasim Okera, all the way from Canada. I know my people. I know my customers.
He asks, what are the panel's views with regards to the role of self-sovereign identity?
What now?
Self-sovereign identity.
Self-sovereign identity.
In the new data economy,
Mm-hmm.
from a perspective of enabling more control of the individual's consent. Should I repeat that?
Please repeat that. And I'm going to give that to, you want to take that? Or Jack, you want to take that? Huh? Data protection.
Data protection.
Okay, please repeat that.
What are the panel's views with regards to the role of self-sovereign identity in the new data economy from a perspective of enabling more control of the individual's consent?
That is a super interesting question. Kasim, thank you so much. Do you want to? You're trying to digest it.
I think just to add to that, goes back to the question I was asked earlier. People may always want to come and, put out a defense as to why have you given me this score, yet I know A, B, C, and D about me. But like I said, because we don't have purview of that data, we can only give you a score based on what we know or what we are able to see. However, if you open up more, we can reassess that and tell you this is what you look like. I'll give you an example. If in the UK, Experian actually go to their customers and say, share more data on yourself and we can boost your score.
Yes.
So more people are actually punching in more data so that their score can be boosted for financial service providers to look at them more favorably. So I think it is a good thing where I'm able, and I think the Commissioner actually talked about that when she said that, how do people take control of their data and say, I want you to use this, don't use that. So I think if that power is in the person, because I then control what it is I want to be seen about me for whatever purpose I'm trying to achieve at that point.
So I think, Kamal, I think that is a really interesting answer. Let me just add on to what Kamal has said. Self-sovereign data, which just basically means it's data that I control, okay? And some of the technologies and platforms are probably going to be based on the blockchain, where I have control of that data. The future is going to be that the more I share, the more I get personalized services. The problem is there are no service providers out there who are ready to ingest my data and give me personalized services. So again, as Jack said it here, these are the opportunities. These are the opportunities in fintech, in e-health. It irritates the hell out of me every time I walk into a hospital. It does not matter whether it is Mata or Aga Khan or wherever. All of them, they're all the same. I walk in, I have a card, I have a thumbprint that they have access to. I still have to fill forms. I go to the next hospital, the same hospital, different branch, I have to do the same thing. So we are, I'm sorry, my brother Kasim, you are too ahead of us, too ahead of most service providers, right? Because customers are willing to give data, to give information, to be served better. But you keep on asking me for the same information every day I come in. Who is it helping, right? So I think that's the only answer we can have for him today.
But I must also add that
yes,
consent is just one. Because many times the customer thinks that people can only use your data when you give consent, which is not the case.
True.
There are many other reasons that your data can be used, even when you have not given your consent. For instance, if it's an issue of public authority,
yes,
if there is a contractual obligation,
correct,
is for what we call vital interest, your life is in danger, and somebody has to make a quick decisions about you.
Yeah.
So they have to help you if it's a matter of law. Because even as we speak, that it's my information, it's my data, I have a right to it, it's my sovereign. Like I have to decide who to share with it.
Absolutely.
And give consent. we have to remember that's not the only reason.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Was there another question? Okay, great. Guys, we are coming to the end of this evening of public conversations, but I think we still have bitings, we still have drinks at the back. So I'm going to ask my good people here to give me their closing remarks, 1 minute each. If you pass 1 minute, I cut you off. I'm joking. Let's start with my brother Kamau. Closing remarks.
Yeah, so looking at the future, I mean, there's a lot of opportunity for Africa that is untapped. A lot of it is based on data and technology. How that is managed and used as we move forward is what is the critical question. However, we still see a lot of underserved people in the market across different services, and yet the data exists. There's so much opportunity for us to draw from it and not have to rely on standard products that are brought in from the West. If you look at, for example, a good example that everyone talks about, M-Pesa, and what M-Pesa was able to do for Kenya and now being rolled out for Africa. And we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more similar solutions and services that can be done. So I have a lot of hope for Africa in the future from a technology and data-driven perspective.
Thank you, Kamau. Shiko?
So for me, I want to bring it home. We are a continent of either cocomelons or 19-year-olds. So, get me. So, the average age of Africa is about 19.5 years old. So when you think about the future, you have to think the future in the lens of a 19.5-year-old. Or that, those people who use put cocomelon, they come running quickly to you.
Yes.
Those ones. They are half of our continent. What are we doing to respond to their needs using technology? Yeah? And that's why I started with AI is a great solution, but are we putting those kids center in what we are solving for? Yeah? Are we creating more dignified employment opportunities? Yesterday I was so broken by that New York Times article.
Yes.
Yeah? Well, there was argument. I mean, I read the internet. There was arguments on both sides. Oh, they're getting an income, but is it dignified? Yeah. So we have to think, how do we, as African people, will take advantage of AI? I'll be there in front, cheering everybody to take advantage of AI. But how are we taking it advantage to serve that 19.5-year-old who is the average age of this continent? Yeah, and if that does not, every time you put cocomelon for that child or your aunt, your niece, remember that they need dignified lives. Yeah.
Shiko, thank you so much, Madam Kasait.
Thank you. Thank you to our audience and for the opportunity to be here today. I want to say that as a continent, we now can see that different African governments are actually very supportive. And just coming home, we've seen a lot of support from the highest level. In this case, His Excellency, in terms of his determination for the digital superhighway. I think the challenge to us is to innovate more, to think how then we can align our programs to make sure we are achieving that government policy in terms of the people in the techie. I think it's important so that as we ensure more Kenyans are in this space, and we are innovating more and creating more jobs for young people to ensure that they actually are living in dignity. And then, of course, finally, like I said, I think we are not innovating enough matters data privacy. The challenge I'm throwing back to the industry.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Jack.
Yeah. So I'd like to close by saying, first of all, personally and as the organization I work for, we're invested in all of us in Africa because we are Africans and we live here. Our families are all here. And we are open to all of you. If you have any pressing needs, challenges, understand what these models do, what new business models you want to adopt, please reach out. We always respond, at least I do, always. Respond, whether it's on email or WhatsApp or whatever. And we're willing to help and walk this journey together, more than just a service provider who's doing things that are far-flung from you. And the second thing here is what I always say, we need to move towards more of creator and builders away from consumers. And I really hope this is a call to all of you. If you're a writer, if you're a PR specialist, it'd be nice to see more books from PR specialists in Africa on how to approach this market. It'd be nice to see more engineers who are actually building these models from here. And personally, I'm willing to support in a lot of those things that you're doing. Again, we're invested here. I'm invested here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, everyone. For me, I want to close this with a clarion call. I work in the tech industry, and some of you would call me one of the OGs. Okay? But I had some interesting conversations with my sons who are here with me today as part of my team. And those conversations I've had with them have been brought home by what Shiko has said about Africa being a young population. 19.5, I actually didn't have that data set, so thank you, Shiko. So let me say this. Every startup, okay, let me strike that. Most startups I talk to are raising money for a big, hairy, audacious goal. Okay, which is good. I have a couple of things I want to say. Number one, raising money is not a bad thing. As we raise money for our startups, also think of what I call P2P. Now, in the tech space, P2P would immediately mean peer-to-peer. No, that's not what I mean. I mean, you must have your path to profitability inside your mind as you're building and as you're raising money. That's one. Two, and this is more important and more critical for all of us here and anybody else who is listening to me, leader or follower or whatever. African tech is facing its Berlin conference moment. Who's a history student here who can tell me what I mean by Berlin conference when it comes to Africa? Yes, sir.
Where different European powers came together to agree among themselves who would get a slice of the pie in which...
Exactly. And why am I saying African tech is facing a Berlin conference moment? Let me just tell you for a fact, for free, as we love to say in Nairobi. The majority of African tech startups who have done well are unfortunately today no longer African-owned because they are owned by foreign venture capital. That's why I'm saying we are facing a Berlin conference moment. It's not something that we like to discuss. It's not something that is probably even politically correct, but hey, anybody who knows me knows that I'm an equal opportunity offender. Now, how do we answer this question? We answer this question by investing in our youth. We answer this question by not stopping to invest in Mugunda. And for those who don't understand what I'm talking about, in real estate and land, by starting to think about new African tech as a new asset class for the African affluent. By starting to invest our time in mentoring our youth. By starting to say, that cousin of mine or that nephew of mine who has an interesting tech idea, he's not crazy. He's not smoking something he shouldn't have smoked that morning. Or because he's wearing Rastafarians, he's not with us. This is a clarion call. This is a conversation we must start having. And I'm hoping that as we talk about it today, and guys, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying foreign capital is wrong. We should not accept foreign capital. We love foreign capital. We must infuse it with African capital. But most are not doing this. The minute we get a few shillings, we are off to Kitengela or Malindi or wherever and subdivide land. Talk to the OG. So the reason why we have these conversations, the reason why Ali Talks Tech is here, is so that we can open up these conversations. We can have these conversations with Jack. Jack has just said, he's here, he's happy to help. I'm here, I'm happy to help. Shiko, Kamau, Madam Kasset, and we need to open this tech ecosystem and debunk it and remove the sort of magic that is sort of identified with it, so that high net worth Africans and investment companies can start looking at this ecosystem. Guys, thank you so much. Please feel free, and let's continue having this conversation. Asanteni sana.